Who the fuck is Apex Lex Luthor? Let's talk about it. Welcome back, everyone. It is I, the double whose door is always open. Gandalf without the gray or the white, because I'm all black. Joey LaForge, captaining this enterprise, and the people's podcaster, Left Eye E.G.O. And so today we're going to be talking about some DC news. You know, I can't get enough of that DC news. But it was some interesting news that I saw drop a few days ago about some casting rumors and some choices for James Gunn's Superman Legacy that's dropping in 2025. So we're going to go through the article in question together, and I'm going to give you some backstory about this Apex Luthor, as well as his actual comic book origins in DC's Rebirth line. All right, so let's go ahead and bring this up here. Article in question is actually by The Wrap, and it says Superman Legacy casting heats up with Nicholas Hoult, Rachel Brosnahan in the mix. All right, so it says that going down here that Gunn's now watching audition tapes, and those in the mix for the role for Superman include Nicholas Hoult, David Corenswet, Jacob Elordi, Andrew Richardson, and for Lois Lane, we've got in the running Rachel Brosnahan, the casting petition of Emma Mackey, and Samara Weaving. Now, as far as just the casting options, I'm actually a big fan of, where is his name? Nicholas Hoult. I saw him show his kind of zombie-like or robot-like appearance and acting when it came to Warm Bodies that came out forever ago, as well as him kind of with superpowers when you watch Renfield, which I highly suggest. So I'm thinking that Gunn seeing those two versions of Nicholas Hoult is probably going to win out, and he's probably going to be the next Superman. Don't really mind it, but it seems that even though they're trying to go with an older version of Batman with Bradley Cooper, so they're going with an older version of Batman with Bradley Cooper and trying to go with a younger version of Batman. It's like that's kind of like what Zack Snyder was doing, but that's neither here nor there. There is even a section here. We're going to get to the Apex Luthor thing in a second, but it said that Gunn was actually eyeing black actors for the part of Lex Luthor. I know what you're thinking, guys. I know what you're thinking. That is a smashing idea. I always saw, as a Black American myself, in Lex Luthor. I can't believe such representation is available at this time frame in our time in American history, and I cannot wait to finally see myself in that version of Lex Luthor. You guys know how I feel. I don't really like lazy race swaps, and I think that if you're going to have this version of Lex Luthor be black, just make him Samuel L. Jackson. Hire him to play Lex Luthor, just so we can get the iconic line of, "That's it! I've had it with this motherfucking Kryptonian on my motherfucking planet." Problem solved. All right. That's kind of what my thoughts are on the projected casting of a Black Lex Luthor, especially considering the fact that we're not going to get a version of Lex Luthor that would be a friend and ally turned enemy, a la Smallville, or even a very jealous man that's a megalomaniac that also loves humanity so much he's willing to frame an alien to show how evil he can be. A la Brian Azzarello's version in Luthor, which is actually a very deep and nuanced version of Luthor that I've yet to see transpire on the big screen. But no, he's actually going to jump straight to Apex Luthor. And so with that, I've had a lot of people say, "Who's that guy? I don't really know who this is, and why jump to this version?" So I'm actually going to give you quite the backstory on this. Believe me, it's going so. I just want to explain to you guys the version that he's getting. So after Rebirth launched, they actually wound up going with Justice League. There were different iterations of it, but the main version of the Justice League that you see on Justice League, the animated series, that goes up against the Legion of Doom that you see, happened in Justice League Volume 1, The Totality. In that, they explain that during the crisis for Dark Knight's Metal, where the Justice League armored in nth metal defeats 7 different versions of Bruce Wayne and the Batman Who Laughs. I think it was some kind of wish that they used to kind of wish away the threat and defeat these evil versions of Bruce Wayne and the Batman Who Laughs. But in doing so, they actually weakened the Source Wall. And the Source Wall, once weakened, had the totality that kind of fell right through. And so they explained to you during this time frame that Vandal Savage had a piece of the totality, and he had different people over the millennia study it and try to figure out its meaning. While the whole time Vandal Savage knew that it was an actual remnant of a serious threat, and that he was trying to figure out how it works, we could avert that threat by moving the Earth out of the path with the totality as it would head to Earth, or the rest of what was coming with the totality. And so they actually explain that he actually hires Lionel Luthor as one of his cohorts to study the totality and figure out how it would work. And in doing so, Lex Luthor finds out about, other alien technology, the actual evidence of alien life. He figures out the still force, which is kind of the antithesis of the speed force. He finds the ultraviolet, right, which is kind of ultraviolet light. That is kind of the antithesis of the emotional spectrum that's visible light. And all this comes to play during the Doom War that you wind up seeing 4 or 5 volumes later. And so in conducting these experiments, Lionel Luthor, actually behind Vandal Savage's back, actually finds a way to kidnap a Martian and bring him to Earth. That Martian was actually John Johns. And so while he's conducting these experiments to try to find this behavior between Martians and humans, because the DNA kind of seems similar, you find out that a young John Johns befriends, his name is Albie, calls himself Albie, right? And so Albie and a young John Johns become friends. And so they would take trips in John John's mind, and they'd have a mental link where they actually be superheroes, kind of like what you would see in Super Son. They defeat the bad guys, they have this great friendship. And so after several of the experiments that Lionel Luthor tries to put on John Johns fail, Albie tells John Johns that, hey, he writes it actually in his shirt on the ultraviolet spectrum and tells him, hey, I'm letting you know right now, I can't talk, but read my shirt. They are planning to kill you. I've actually rigged the machine so that when they flip the switch, instead of killing you, it's actually going to transport you back to Mars. And so right before he's transported back, John Johns says, tell Albie, what is your real name? And so he turns around, his back says Alex on the back. And you're like, yo, you're telling me Alex Luthor and John Johns were kind of like childhood friends? It was very interesting, very intricate. And so, John Johns actually gets sent back to Mars, and you find out that Vandal Savage finds out that Lionel Luthor's been doing these experiments behind his back. And so as punishment, what he does is he basically wipes his academic history, says that from now on, everyone will know you as a failure who never got out of high school and who never left, ding, 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 Metropolis. And so he actually sends him backpacking, and none of his references will ever be of merit. So he winds up going through this time of knowing that no one will hire him because he's technically, even though he is a genius, he doesn't have any resume to speak of because Vandal Savage has actually used all of his connections to render him a failure. And so they show Lionel as this drunk that beats his children because his kids are smarter than he is. That genetic material of that genius intellect transfers down to Lex Luthor. And so in going through all this, you have Lex Luthor actually trying to build up the Legion of Doom. And the first victim of that is actually Vandal Savage. Opening sequence of the totality for Volume 1 is Lex Luthor beating Vandal Savage to death. Pretty gnarly, right? And so in doing this, there are concepts of, the concept of justice, which actually is what's right, what's fair, what's done in the best interest, versus doom, kind of like embracing the fact that we're all screwed and you have no real willpower over it. And so throughout the story, you keep hearing about Perpetua. Perpetua was actually the entity that was locked out of our universe via the source wall. You find out that Perpetua actually created all known life as we know it, and created the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor, and I think the Forger of Worlds. And so her deal was she created both humans and Martians, and although they would wind up being warring factions, she wanted them to actually become this evolution of a hybrid race. And so after she pretty much said this isn't going to work, she set up our universe for destruction. That's when the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor actually teamed up and locked Perpetua out in the source wall. So when that source wall was fractured, she found a way to try to get through. And so she actually tries to kind of influence Lex to embrace Doom. And by doing so, she says she has to have faith, which is something that Lex Luthor doesn't really have or believe in. He believes in science, cold hard facts, data, and essentially megalomania, right? And so she actually has him devise a plan to actually trick John Johns into a meeting. And what he winds up doing is he winds up finding a way to change his own DNA to make him kind of a semi-hybrid. And he actually unlocks John John's DNA and actually absorbs him, thereby becoming the apex predator Lex Luthor. And that's essentially the backstory behind the this version of Lex Luthor that James Gunn, I believe, is trying to present on screen. Now, the problem I have with this is very simple. That story I just told you dropped in 2018. That's Volume 1, the totality. By the time you get to Hawk World, which is I think Volume 3, or even the Doom War, that's 2020. And the problem I have with this is the fact that he's using stories that are less than 5 years old, let alone the fact that they're not necessarily well-known or critically acclaimed stories. They're 5 years old. How are you going to bring about Superman Legacy with a young version of Superman, and you're giving me the latest version of Lex Luthor, and you're giving me the one that's a hybrid version? Excuse me. How are you also going to tell this without explaining the remnants of the Dark Knight's metal fallout, the concept of doom versus justice, the fact that Perpetua is an actual being that created the known life in Earth Prime universe, and the fact that we can't have either the Justice League or the Legion of Doom in this movie? How are you going to circumvent all of that and just present to us apex predator Lex Luthor? You see where guys I'm going with this, guys? So I know that was very, very long and a very detailed explanation of the comic book history behind Apex Predator Lex Luthor, but that's the actual backstory, and I don't see this being a successful version of Superman if you're going to go from, hey, this is a young Superman, against, hey, this is a very trained and very calculated and older version of Lex Luthor who needed help of a cosmic deity just to become the version of Lex Luthor that you're trying to show us. So guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments, or if you want a follow-up on this video once the actual casting for both Clark Kent and Lois Lane, as well as Lex Luthor, are announced. Let me know. But for now, guys, E.G.O out.